people being posed by water in the various places in the South. So as a northern student, what we felt we could do was to picket the Woolworth stores because they weren't serving blacks at the counter. And I became active in that way in my own community first. And then through the National Council of Christians and Jews, which has now changed and has become the, what? CCEJ. Back when it was NCCJ, groups of black and white students in New York, we got together to try to figure out what could we do. And so the call came out and said, which of you want to put what you believe in and bear witness by going south? And I had never been to the South before. So the first time, I spent Christmas in jail in Eastern Shore of Maryland. Now that wasn't the Deep South, but we spent 5 days in jail because we sat in at a lunch counter and we were spit at and we were yelled at. And prior to that, we had to have training in nonviolence. We had to go to classes taught by Reverend James Lawson, who some of you may know of, because he was Dr. King's nonviolent tutor. Dr. Lawson had gone to India, to Ghana, and studied under Mahatma Gandhi, who really, as you know, took the British troops out of India nonviolently in 1948. So that tradition, and that's where Dr. King actually learned his nonviolent strategy, was from a minister who was still here in Los Angeles. And it was interesting, when I first met Dr. King, I was 19, and he seemed so much older than me. But he really wasn't, because he was only 39 when he was assassinated. And yet, to those of us that were students at the time, we looked up to him, but we were also mad at him. Because, you know how young people say, older folks are too slow, we want to hurry up and do something. So I was a part of that younger group, and Dr. King, he wanted us to do things more organized, and we wanted to sit in, and we wanted to do more direct action and not just marching. We wanted to have different approaches. So it was a friendly relationship between SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which were mostly ministers and older folks, and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC, those students who just didn't want to wait. So, you know, sometimes when we talk about what it is that we have to do, I think about the violence today. I have 9 grandchildren. Some live in very dangerous communities. My grandson was shot. He wasn't killed. Luckily, he was able to deflect the bullet with his hand as he ran down the street in Compton. And so we know that today the violence touches all of us. But the violence that we were fighting in the South was a different kind of violence in the sense, because we actually knew that what we were doing might provoke it, and so we had to be prepared nonviolently to respond. And 3 of the students that you may have heard of, Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, I was a friend of Michael Schwerner's because he grew up in New York. And when they were killed and buried in a river because of their activities in SNCC, it started the 1964 Freedom Summer, where students from all over, black and white, and people from all over the country came to Mississippi, the Mississippi Freedom Summer, where they decided that they were no longer going to tolerate that. So there's so many different ways that I think we can counteract violence. I really don't know the answer today, I tell you, because these guns, they come out of nowhere. It's not because you're protesting, it's not anything. It's a different environment. And we cannot live in fear, I know that. Even when they shot at us, we slept on the floor when the Ku Klux Klan came to push us out for some of the work that we were doing in the fields and teaching people to read and write, and when they were burning down the churches. It was like we had a known enemy, in a sense. And today, we don't really understand why and how this virulence is happening in our community. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that we can do. So yes, the one story that I have that's kind of interesting is when I was in jail in Albany, Georgia in 1962, for, we were marching on the courthouse. Usually when we went on our marches, we armed ourselves with our toothbrushes because we didn't know if we would be arrested, and at least they would let us take a toothbrush in jail. And I had forgotten mine because we didn't know we were going to be arrested that night. We weren't never sure. And lo and behold, Dr. King came up to the cell bars where I was, and he said, "I got toothbrushes for all of you." So he understood that at that point his role was as a support person, and usually we see him, you know, big and famous, but he also was never too big to do small favors and loving things. Thank you.